Okay, we are rolling, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting of the Transport and Infrastructure Committee of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. My name is Anna Smith and I am chair of this committee. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and the press who have joined us today in Huntingdon, and also those who are watching the meeting on our live stream. The Combined Authority allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures and use social media during the meeting. Can I ask, though, that everyone present turns their mobile phones and other devices to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place? There are no fire drills scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will, of course, adjourn the meeting and we will all move to the muster point, which is on the High Street. And we have plenty of officers here who are based here in Huntingdon, and some councillors too who will be able to point us to exactly the right place. I would remind members and officers this meeting will be recorded. So before we hear any of the items on the agenda, I would like to use my prerogative as chair and propose a change to the running order. This is so that items that require a vote are moved up the agenda and those reports for noting move towards the end. That is because Councillor Shayler has been taken ill and is not able to attend the meeting, and Councillor Beckett, his substitute, has at very short notice agreed to attend and will need to leave, I think, around 12. So I'm moving all the items with a vote to the top of the agenda, and items for noting will go to the end. I'm really hoping, actually, that we'll have plenty of time to get through all of this by 12 anyway. But this is a precautionary measure to make sure that we don't run out of time for items that require a vote. Steve, I'm afraid that means that your director's report will bizarrely be going towards the end of the session this time around. I will, however, be taking public questions at the beginning as usual, because that's important for us to hear those questions before we begin the debate. Would the governance manager let us know of any apologies?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just as you said, we've had apologies from Councillor Shader and we have Councillor Beckett in attendance.
Thank you. Does Councillor Wakeford?
Thank you. Can I give a potential preemptive apology for perhaps having to swap out of the meeting for my sub, Councillor Davenport Ray, due to small child illness issues, not unrelated to wearing a mask. So I don't risk giving anything from a child to anyone else. But we'll see how we go. But I will be keeping an eye on my phone on silent. So apologies.
It's okay. And Councillor Wakeford, just to let you know that I have asked officers to look at whether it's possible to switch to a sub halfway through the meeting, so they will let us know when they have an answer on that. I think they might already by the looks of it.
And unfortunately, having checked, our constitution doesn't allow that. So unfortunately, that wouldn't be possible. Councillor Wakeford, apologies.
I assume what we may be able to do in that kind of situation, given that Councillor Wakeford had started the meeting, he would be able to switch to attending online, at which point he could make contributions but not vote. Is that correct? Yeah. So that would be an option. So at least you could continue to contribute at that point.
Thank you. I'm optimistic it'll be moved, but thank you.
Okay, item 2 is the minutes and action log. Is the committee happy to approve the minutes from the 12th of July 2023 as an accurate record and to note the action log? Okay, we have a question. Andy.
So I have that right in front of me. We had an action around Soham Station, and we were going to get some feedback on the metrics from that. I think at the last meeting I was at, I thought that was going to be the retrospective on what had already happened. I see it in the actions as something we will look at it in the future, but I don't have a date on the future. It'd be useful if there was a date associated with that action, just so we know when it's coming back.
Yeah, so that come into the November meeting. Yeah.
Okay, I see no other objections, so we will take the minutes as approved and the action log as noted. And I will just now sign the minutes. So we now move on to item 3, public questions. We have received 4 questions from members of the public for this meeting today. These have been, sorry, my computer has just decided it wants to overwrite what I'm reading. These have been published on the website and also circulated to members. The governance officer will read the first 2 questions out and I will give a response to each one in turn. The third question is from Ms. Sue McGill and the fourth question from Ms. Sarah Hughes from the Cambridge Sustainable Travel Alliance, and both are here in person to read out their questions. So if we could move please to question 1.
Thank you, Chair. First question is from Mr. Anthony Carpen. Please could the Mayor Combined Authority convene a meeting with the developers proposing major residential and sci-tech developments in and around Cambridge with a view to exploring both what their transport needs are likely to be and how they can contribute towards a longer-term rail-based solution to Cambridge's chronic traffic congestion.
Thank you, Anthony. And I should also add an apology that I believe this was initially submitted for the previous meeting. So apologies that you've had to wait for a response. The Combined Authority are keen to improve the public transport offer across Cambridgeshire, Peterborough and beyond, and particularly the enhancements. Sorry, I'm in the wrong. I've got my questions in a different order here. Let me just. Yeah, no, I've got it here now. Thank you. Okay, I will start again. So the Combined Authority is looking to work with partners to improve our rail network, ranging for high-level strategic infrastructure projects through to enhancements to the timetabling and integration of the rail network with other modes of travel, and therefore making sure that we align with the emerging local transport and connectivity plan. We recently held the Importance of Rail for the South East and East of England Summit, and that was chaired by the Right Honourable Norman Baker. At this event, we heard from a range of guests. These included Steve Beale, who was Chief Executive Officer of Freeport East, Jonathan Denby, who was Head of Corporate Affairs at Greater Anglia, Alex Roy, who was Head of Policies at the Manchester Airports Group, Helen Fallon, who was Principal Lead for National Networks England Economic Heartland, Andy Summer, who's Chief Exec of Transport East, Jess Cunningham, who's Transport Advisor of Strategic Projects at Cambridge University, Beth West from East West Rail, and Jamie Jones from Anglia Ruskin Peterborough. That meeting presented the Full Steam Ahead Future-Proofing British Businesses Through Rail intervention document. In addition, the Mayor, Dr. Johnson, and the Combined Authorities Chief Executive, Rob Bridge, sent a letter to the Secretary of State for Transport and the Chancellor of the Exchequer regarding the urgency of dealing with Ely Junction. Businesses were given the opportunity to support the necessary changes that are needed at Ely by signing the letter. And we will add a link to that letter in the published papers so that everyone can see that. I believe quite a few people around this table or in the audience also signed this letter, and thank you to those who did. Finally, the Combined Authority is working with local authorities to engage with East West Rail to maximise the opportunities for the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and a meeting with our surrounding local authorities to discuss Network Rail strategic plans to ensure that concerns, risks and opportunities are presented at the regional and the national level. Strategic rail plans across our greater regional region must be integrated. So we must have that integrated approach, which is also what we are trying to achieve through our local transport and connectivity plans. To conclude, the Combined Authority would very much welcome the opportunity to work with the developer to propose new major sites around Cambridge, as well as with the relevant planning authorities on what the transport needs are going to be and how developers can contribute to helping us address those needs, because as I said, that must be a joined up and integrated approach. Thank you. So I believe we have question 2 from Mr. Paul Hollingshurst.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, second question is, at the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 15th of March, in response to a public question, it was stated that The Combined Authority is working with Network Rail around the appraisal of options for the link between Wisbech and March, and a further report will be provided to the committee in summer 2023. The agenda document pack for the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 12th of July recorded the following: minutes of the meeting on the 14th of June 2023, specific item on Wisbech to March rail scheme to be presented at the September meeting. The agenda document pack for the Transport and Infrastructure Committee meeting on the 13th of September records the following, which is different: minutes of the meeting on the 14th of June 2023, specific item on Wisbech to March rail scheme to be presented at the November meeting to align with the project timelines and engagement with Network Rail. Why has this entry been modified to a later date, and what is the status of the latest appraisal work between the Combined Authority and Network Rail, which was due to be provided in summer 2023, as this scheme seems to be stuck in an endless cycle of delays and reports? Relating to this, please could I also draw the committee's attention to an article about the Wisbech reopening and tram train in the September 2020 edition of the industry respected magazine Modern Railways, a copy of which is attached.
Many thanks, Paul, and thank you too for your continued engagement with this committee, which is extremely helpful. As you correctly note, this report has had to be delayed. The Wisbech Rail project will now be coming to the November 23 TIC meeting to allow for the work being undertaken by Network Rail to be reported at that meeting. At this meeting, we will be able to hear about the work undertaken on the range of options on the corridor between Wisbech and March. In the meantime, Network Rail tell us that they are continuing to work on the options appraisal report, and progress will be reported at the November meeting. In addition, Combined Authority officers are still working with potential partners to identify solutions for the corridor in the short, medium and long term. I have asked our officers that we extend an invitation to Network Rail to join us at that meeting so that we can hear from them directly. Thank you. Now, I think, Sue, you're here, so would you like to come and join us?
Is that on? Is it on? Right, okay, I'm Sue McGill and I'm part of the campaign group to reinstate a regular bus service in Wittering, Wansford, Castor and Aylesworth. And I'm here today because when I approach people, I'm forever being, said, well, there's going to be a congestion charge in Peterborough. And so there is a rumour circulating Peterborough that it will have a congestion charge. Is this correct? Because if not, people really need to know that it's a false rumour or it's highly unlikely.
I suspect that both I and Dr. Nick would like to say something on this item. So if I answer first, and Dr. Nick, if I miss anything and you'd like to come in afterwards, then I will use chair's prerogative to allow that to happen, if that's okay. Good. So I'm aware of this rumour, and Dr. Nick and I have done our best to set the record straight. So I'm glad to be able to do that again in this meeting. Thank you for bringing it. I'm going to be slightly repetitive in this answer, but I really want to make sure the point is clear. The key part of this answer is that this is a question you need to ask the leader of Peterborough City Council and not us, because the decision lies with Peterborough City Council and not with us. It is for the City Council in Peterborough to decide whether or not to introduce a congestion charge as the relevant highways authority. I believe that this confusion may have arisen because the draft local transport and connectivity plan sets out a range of possible measures that could be taken across our region. Now, those measures are simply an attempt to outline a menu of measures which are neither compulsory nor exhaustive. Many of them would require by law the express buy-in of the relevant local highways authorities. In the case of charging in Peterborough, that relevant authority is the City Council as a Tier 1 authority. Not only does the combined authority have no plans at all to ask Peterborough to consider charging, the decision to whether to accept that request, even if it were made, would lie squarely with Peterborough. And I think it's important to make it clear that Peterborough voting to allow the LTCP to pass would not change that. As I said, the LTCP simply sets out a basket of possible measures authorities may choose to use. It does not in any way override the powers of those local authorities to make those choices. Now, it's also worth saying that mayoral powers differ around the country. In London, the mayor has greater power on highways issues, but that is not the case here. Any comparison with what is happening in London is therefore spurious. Now, you may be aware that the Combined Authority Mayor does not have a voting position on the GCP board, and we have been clear all along, the decision of Cambridgeshire, Cambridge City and South Cambs as to whether, as a joint committee of councils, to pursue a charge in Greater Cambridgeshire is theirs and not ours. We respect the decisions that the GCP board comes to with the relevant authorities, and we would similarly respect the decisions on charging that may or may not be made by Peterborough. So to repeat, it is for Peterborough City Council to decide whether it wishes to introduce a congestion charge in Peterborough. Mayor Nick, do you want to come in on anything there?
Oh, you know what? I really can't add any more to that very clear response. I'm just sorry that sometimes when people are trying to develop transport policy, there are opportunities used along the way when people have different points of view to sometimes concern residents unnecessarily. I'm grateful for your challenge to the organisation. Our messaging is clear, and I would just reiterate what my colleague, the lead member for transport, has already said. Ultimately, any decision along those lines sits fairly and squarely with Peterborough City Council, but you know what? It really sits fairly and squarely with the residents who vote the people to be their representatives on Peterborough City Council. So I would suggest the residents make their choices wisely when they choose who they represents their point of view at the City Council, because it's important to always tell the truth.
Sue, do you have a supplementary?
I just thank you very much for clarifying that. That's absolutely great. And I will be taking it to full council at the next full council meeting in Peterborough.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we have question 4, which is from Ms. Sarah Hughes, who is the STZ campaign officer at Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance. Sarah, do take a seat.
Thank you very much. So, as Councillor Smith said, I'm asking my question on behalf of the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance. We're an alliance of 31 member organisations active in the areas of transport, environment and health. In July and August, the Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance interviewed more than 300 bus users in Cambridge, Ely and Huntingdon, and you can read the survey results on our website. Our interview suggests that bus users rely deeply on bus services. 74% of non-park and ride bus users we talked to didn't own or have access to a car, compared to the national average of 22% of households. And 56% said they would not have made their journey without the bus. As one bus user put it, "I use the bus because I haven't got any other choice." Our survey indicates that buses are in a poor state, however. 44% of all non-park and ride bus users we surveyed and 51% of non-park and ride users in Cambridge said their services were late or unreliable. 37% of non-park and ride bus users said their bus services were too infrequent, and people told us that short operating hours and a lack of Sunday services limit opportunities. Here's some of what people told us. The worst thing is the unreliability. I have no idea if it's coming or not. It's difficult to be on time for hospital appointments. On Saturday, there was a 2.5-hour wait because 2 buses were cancelled. It'll say on the board they're coming, then it won't turn up. There's 2 minutes to go, then it's cancelled. I want to be on time. I want to be independent more. I want to get the bus, but it's always late. I have to get picked up then. Weekends are impossible. I rely on colleagues or my husband has to drive me from our village to work at Papworth Hospital. If there's no bus, we're stuck at home. Bank holidays, we're stuck. Sundays, we're stuck. We're older people and we have to rely on buses. We need later services. Teenagers just can't get to anything in Ely. Ely, the cinema, is 7 miles from Chatteris. The Cambridgeshire Sustainable Travel Alliance welcomes the Combined Authorities' proposals for reform of bus service provision. We further welcome the assumption that, at a minimum, the combined authority will be seeking to implement a mid-level of investment in service improvements. So could the Transport and Infrastructure Committee please explain how future, now expected to be restricted GCP funding will impact the combined authority's ability to improve bus services in the Cambridge travel to work area?
Thank you. And thank you very much for your commitment, which I'm going to make. I think we probably all share around this table to improving public transport across the whole region. Like you, and I'm sure like everyone here, I'm acutely aware of the importance of good public transport for all, not just including, but probably especially for those who can't drive, who don't have access to a car, who can't afford to run one, and particularly those issues of rural connectivity, where if there is no bus, and I had some experience of visiting the residents of the villages just outside of Peterborough around Wittering and Caster, who currently have no bus service. So very, very aware of the issues of rural connectivity there. We will absolutely continue our work on bus reform. There are several papers today which I hope demonstrate that commitment to continuing that work. That includes the first stages of a network review and also the request for support from this committee to undertake a bus reform audit. A key part of the process in the next few months is a formal examination of the funding sources for bus reform, and that's why we are hoping to be able to pass that audit today as a recommendation to the board. You mentioned Greater Cambridgeshire, so just to focus on that for a moment, obviously aware that as a committee, we're looking more broadly than that, but just on your specific question, the GCP clearly still has funding to improve transport, and what we are very keen to do is to work with the GCP so that we can explore how best to use those available funds for the benefit of the people and businesses in our region. And I think that's a really important commitment that, again, I suspect we all share. Funding of buses is a very, very important issue, and I would certainly urge as well anyone here who may have connections to the current government to be putting the case for Cambridgeshire as well. We are probably all aware, for example, that Cambridgeshire and Peterborough receive, in fact, the East of England in general, receive an average of £16 a head per person per year for public transport. Now, if you look at other comparable authorities around the country, you're looking at somewhere like 35, 36, 37 pounds a year per head. So the East of England is significantly underfunded for transport. It would be, of course, most desirable that there is some levelling up of that transport funding to bring the East of England to a closer level. So that's what I'm going to say for now. I'm not going to go into details around funding sources because that's something that the audit and that process, which is a directed process from the government for us to go through if we're looking at bus reform, that's what that's there for. But we will keep this committee and others who are interested clearly updated in the progress as we go along. So thank you very much. I don't know if you have a follow-up.
Thank you. No follow-up question required.
Okay. Well, thank you very much to yourself and to the others who have submitted questions. I do want to remind people who may be watching online or who may be here that public questions are a really vital part of the work that we do. It's really important to hear from members of the public, from stakeholder groups, but also individuals about the issues they are facing. Please do come or send those questions. You also have the option to attend online to ask those questions. Now, this is where, if you've got printed sheets, we're going to have to be a bit agile around the order. We're going to go on to the new item 4, which is the item on electric vehicles. And Emma White, Transport Programme Manager, is going to introduce our report. Thank you, Emma. Sorry, Councillor Seaton.
I may have missed it, but I don't think we did declarations of interest, and I need to do a couple of declarations.
Thank you for reminding me, and a reminder to everybody that they can do that at any time, as you have just done. Councillor Seaton, do you wish to make those declarations now?
Thank you, Chair. It's the two declarations. One is that I'm a trustee of the FACT Community Travel Service, and I'm also chairman of the Hereward Community Rail Partnership. Thank you.
Okay. Does that in any way stop Councillor Seaton voting on those items or not? Because if you have a look, and when we get further down, you could let us know. Any other declarations of interest at this point? Okay, and Rebecca, welcome. Don't worry. Over to you.
Morning, everyone. This is the paper on the electric vehicles. In March 2023, the Combined Authority was successful in securing funding from government equating to 88,000 under the Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund. The Local Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund has two main objectives. Firstly, to deliver a step change in the deployment of primarily low power, local on-street charging infrastructure across England, and two, to accelerate the commercialisation of and investment in the local charging infrastructure sector. Discussions with Peterborough City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council resulted in this funding being earmarked for an EV officer post for a year for both highways authorities. Recruitment for these posts is currently ongoing. Later that month, an indicative allocation to the Combined Authority was made of up to 5 million capital and another 400,000 capability funding under the same funding for the next 2 years. The pro forma expression of interest for both pots of money was submitted in August. The Combined Authority was successful for the bid of 400,000 capability funding. The 5 million capital fund tranche 2 was entered, and next year a detailed application for this funding will need to be undertaken. Collaboration between local authorities is a requirement of the Levi Fund. Therefore, the Combined Authority are looking to work as one team with both highways authorities. The capability funding looks to achieve a number of items, including finalising the EV strategy, engagement and procurement, as well as preparing the business case for the capital fund, 5 million. The split of funds is earmarked between CPCA, CCC and PCC for resource, as well as some external activities, including branding, consultancy and engagement. Other progress today includes working with an EV working group, engagement with a number of different areas and progressing the procurement work. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you very much for the important work that you're doing on this. Do we have any questions or comments on this item? Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to declare an interest because I have an electric vehicle, but then I realised that everybody else have to declare of interest having a non-electric vehicle, so I think I'm okay. No, Emma, it was just a suggestion because I noticed in the paper engagement of stakeholders. One of the constraints, Chair, that the supermarket delivery vans have in converting to electric is that there aren't many electric charging points in our rural areas. So when you're going through the process, Emma, if you would maybe talk to a couple of the supermarkets about this, because they're all whizzing around our villages, but they're still diesel vehicles or some petrol vehicles. It'd be great to see them to be able to do that. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to see if we can take another chunk of questions before we come back to you, Emma. So, Mayor Nick, I think you have a question. Is that right? Do we have any other questions? And another question there, Councillor Sharp and Councillor Beckett. If we can take 4 first, if you're able to cope with that many at once, and then if we've got further ones, we'll come back to it after that. So, Mayor Nick first, please.
Thank you. Just to follow on from that question, it's actually perfectly set up a query that I've got for you, Emma, which you probably will know is coming, because in regards to supermarkets, obviously supermarkets are also what I would describe as large petrol retailers. And for those who have studied the Constitution like I have, they may well be aware that in section 3.3.3, the Mayor is apparently able to exercise a power to ask the Secretary of State for Transport to make regulations under Section 11 of the Automated Electrical Vehicle Act 2018, requiring large fuel retailers and service area operators to provide public charging points and to ensure public charging points are maintained and easily accessible. the power would be limited to large fuel retailers in the area within their authority. As I say, you set it up nicely, because I just wanted to put it on record that this is something I picked up a long, long time ago. And obviously, I have, on occasion, written to the Secretary of State for Transport. But I understand at the moment this power is not available because there isn't any secondary legislation. So it's an open question to yourself, Emma, and also to the board around, bearing in mind, as you've teed up with regard to local fuel retailers and particularly those in supermarkets who may well benefit if they had more electrical charging points within their own premises, also providing it to the community. Is there a way that we can maybe work further to try and ensure that this power is something that we can implement in the course of time? Thank you.
I think Councillor Sharp, you might have been next.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments, really, or one question and one comment. In 3.3, it mentions government launched this 8 million local or Levi Capability Fund. Am I right in understanding we received 5.4 million of that? So it seems a low amount nationally. So I just wondered. And the second one is more we obviously need to get on with this and get more electric vehicle charging points around. But from my point of view, it looks the actual staffing looks quite expensive for 492,000 for what we're actually trying to achieve. But I know that's a 3-year cost, so perhaps that may not be unreasonable. But yeah, I'm just really querying why such a high cost for it's virtually probably about 220,000 a year. It seems to me initially a large amount, but and the other question was around the capital fund. We were receiving 5.437, but 3.3 states that the government were allocating 8 million. So we've virtually am I right in thinking we've virtually gained most of the money the government are allocating?
Okay, Councillor Beckett.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this report. It's very interesting to read, and will do something we need to be thinking a lot about. I had 2 quick questions. Firstly, the EV officer. I just had a quick question. Is that one officer split between 2 different authorities? And if so, where will that officer sit? And the second kind of point/question is that while delivering electric charging points is incredibly important, the other part of the puzzle is obviously allowing others to deliver charging points and the policy involved in doing that, particularly to allow residents to be able to, charge their own vehicles when they have off-street parking. Is there any way that officer can go towards some of the policy development that we're doing and that side of things as well to be able to now enable others to deliver their own charging? Thanks.
That's probably more than enough for one. So if you can cover off the bits you can, and if you need to defer up to either of your colleagues at the other end of the table, then please do so.
So going back to the funding, in terms of the 8 million, that is where the capability fund comes out of, and that's the allocation of the 403,000 plus the 88,000, which has been allocated for all local authorities around the UK, and that's to cover an EV officer resource. What it was flagged is that one of the biggest barriers to local authorities being able to progress the EV work was a lack of resource. So DFT have provided the capability funding to allow local authorities to skill up in the area. In terms of the EV officer, it will be an officer for Peterborough, an officer for Cambridge. There's a table in the report which shows a breakdown, an officer for each. We're also looking at the CPCA to have someone more focused on the EV role under the funding as well, split out. There is also within that funding money to look at some consultancy work, so we can look at mapping where the EV chargers are, where we need them, who has on and off street parking. Levi is predominantly focused on people without driveways that have no on-street parking, so they can't park off streets, so that they are able to do sort of the EV charging. But that does also mean looking into sort of car parks where possible that people can use. And the policy side, the EV strategy will be coming out of this pot of capability funding to progress that work as well. I will pass over to Tim for any other questions on the sort of strategy side. Oh, sorry, what's one last thing? And the 5 million is what we will bid for next year, which comes out a bigger pot of money. And this will be used with the charge point operators as leverage for private investment, so we can get the most out of our money.
Yeah, so just on that, the 5 million is detailed on the DFC website, and that is the allocation we're hoping to secure going forward. Just regarding a couple of the questions, so the councillor Williams, your question around delivery vehicles, etc. We are hoping to progress the freight strategy next year, and part of that will be around how we do delivery both in the rural area but also the urban areas, and using consolidation centres, etc. and in the urban areas, but the rural areas, looking at how we do that. So some of those charging will feed into there. Regarding Mayor Dr. Nick Johnson's question, is yes, it is. We're awaiting the secondary legislation from the Secretary of State for Transport, and I'm working with our Monitoring Officer about how we can influence that going forward, and that is also part of the discussions that I'm having with DFT officers. So but also we need to influence at the political level, so that the feedback from this group, if that's the case, then we can feed that through to the Secretary of State. And then just two other points that I think we probably need to emphasise on the EV area is, with regards to the resources, I think it is key around having those three officers. But there is just to make the committee aware around the expertise in this area. So actually, we can put the post out and actually trying to encourage people to come and work for the Peterborough, Cambridge, or ourselves. Is there are a limited number of people that are experts in this area. It's a growing field, but it is predominantly run by in general by the private sector. We just need to actively encourage people to come and work for us to help with that, steering that program. And also the focus needs to be on the strategies being developed, etc. We need to look at how we do the implementation. And implementation shouldn't be a one size fits all. In terms of our urban areas, will be they'll have specific challenges on some of our EV charges, and then in from our rural areas they'll be significantly different. Therefore, I think the role for the combined authority is to look at that strategy and working with our constituent councils around how we take those forward in the various areas, because the local knowledge will be key on driving that forward.
So we've got Mayor Nick. Anyone else would like to come in? Councillor Simons. So would any more in this round? Okay, over to you, Mayor Nick.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the reassurance on that point, and I kind of wanted to make clear that people realise that there is a power within the combined authority. That's why I was keen to draw attention to it. Mine's more looking towards the future, and I guess I'm looking for reassurance. I'm reminded of a thing, was it probably about 20, 30 years ago, when phone technology was booming, and there was a lot of kind of companies coming into the market who set up lots of different types of phone booths, which were going to be the way that we would all connect better. Obviously, we've all moved on to mobiles now. And knowing full well, whenever I go along to particularly any local government association conference and party conferences, there is increasingly organisations that are keen to encourage engagement with combined authorities, district councils, city councils, saying we are keen to install hardware on the streets of your local community. Now, I'm sure, obviously, we do take a lead both at our district council, county council levels, and we want to be part of that. But I'm also significantly concerned where actually, if the private sector is coming in and they're beginning to kind of engage and put hardware on the streets, how are we going to be reassured in terms of the work that we do that the maintenance of these things, or indeed where companies maybe they're unsuccessful in their rollout, then they leave the hardware on the streets, we're not going to be left with a very cluttered environment on a dream to put electrical vehicle charging, accessible for all, but not at the same time making it inaccessible for those who have challenges moving around the street furniture that we already have to make it even worse. And then, dare I say, then just left there with nobody looking after it.
Thank you. And that saves me from having to chip in on something similar, because I know that is an issue that Councillor Shaler was keen to raise if he was going to be here. So, Councillor Simons.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just about Peterborough. I mean, we've managed to locate a member of staff that got expertise to obviously roll this out in Peterborough. So we're very fortunate. But Tim's quite right. It is very difficult to recruit people in this field.
Thank you. Any comments or follow-ups on those? Emma?
I think it's to give the reassurance to the group. It is a new field and technologies are progressing as we sort of go. We are in tranche 2 for the 5 million. So we have this whole year to work up how we want things to look. The EV strategy is really important to how we want to shape the infrastructure in the CPCA area. And part of that funding will be used for engagement with everyone, stakeholders, councils, public, to what we want to see out on our streets. There is a lot of options out there and the best way to progress it. So it won't be a case of this is what's going ahead, this is how we do it. There'll be full engagement, and the same with procurement. CPCA will be planning to run that, and it will all be done through the governance and engagement channels to make sure what goes out has been engaged on.
Okay, and Tim, I think you want to come in on that.
Yes. Just to reiterate Emma's point, is we do have time to work about strategy, what is the right way forward. There is a role going forward on what the public sector do, but also what the private sector do. And we need to make sure that they are not duplicating effort, but also that they are working hand in glove. And part of the contract, if we do go down that route with the private sector, we'll need to look at ongoing maintenance, and also who owns the kit as well, because ultimately that could be a funding source for the public sector, but also for the private sector. We need to understand how this will wash its face going forward as well.
Thank you. Now, I will take one more round of questions on this, and I think we'll need to move on to the next item. So, and I have Councillor Beckett. Is there anyone else? This is your last chance to make a question or a comment. Councillor Beckett, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one for me. Yes, the on-street parking or on-street siting of these is deeply problematic in a lot of areas, particularly where we have narrow pavements. And I know it's something, as you say, Councillor Shaler is very passionate about, but making sure that the policy that we adopt for this does take into account for that. The other slight one that I'm very aware of is that in Cambridge City, we have about 30% of residents getting to work by bike every day. And obviously we have a large number of e-bikes, and we've also seen a large number of fires that have been caused by people charging their e-bikes indoors. There's large areas of the city where it's simply not possible to take your bike inside or have your own premises to be able to store it. So I wonder whether there's an opportunity for us as well to explore that, and whether it's possible to, at the same point as charging electric vehicles, also allow electric, bicycles at the same time for people that aren't able to do that, because it is becoming, especially in the city, a really large part of the mix.
Yeah, I just want to endorse that point. I think it's a really important one about what we do to ensure the safety of charging of all vehicles and not just the cars, as they will become more prevalent. Emma?
And it's to give that reassurance back that I'm working with Yo and Anna to coordinate sort of the ideas of possibly travel hubs, mobility hubs, coordinate everything together. So it'll be a joined up strategy going forwards for the combined authority area.
Thank you. So this is, I start to feel on these meetings these days, I need to be surrounded by a bank of screens. We do have items to vote for on this. So there are two report recommendations. One is to note progress, but one is to make a representation to the board, subject to confirmation of receipt of funding, to approve the drawdown of £403,440 from the Levi Capability Fund to be spent in financial years 2023 through to 2025. We also have, I see, and over the page we have two more recommendations as well. So then we have recommendation C and recommendation D as well, and these are around delegated authorities. Do I have any objection to voting on the recommendations on MES? Okay, in which case I am going to ask for your vote on those recommendations. I'm happy to propose these. Can I have a seconder, please? Mayor Nick, thank you. So we will now move to the vote. Can I see all those in favour of the recommendations, please? I believe that is unanimous across voting members, so that has been passed. Thank you. Will be really helpful. So as we move on to item 5, which is now the bus network review, we do have some advice around conflicts of interest. So Bridget, do you want to tell us about that?
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So just to clarify, it depends on the type of interest that you're disclosing, and it's up to you as a councillor to decide whether that's a pecuniary interest or not. But I can give some guidance about what a pecuniary interest is. And the implication is that if it's a pecuniary interest, then you have to withdraw from the debate and the discussion about the report. And also there's a slight complexity there that if it's a personal interest, which may become a pecuniary interest, then you'd also have to withdraw. So the Constitution describes pecuniary interests if they relate to employment, office, trade or profession as an employment, office, business, trade, profession or vocation carried on a for-profit or gain basis. So I'm assuming it's not an employment if it's a trusteeship. And then just to go on, apologies while I find the right part. If it was an award of a contract or potentially a contract extension, which I know is covered under, is it the bus network report further down the line, further down the agenda, if you were looking at the award of goods and services and you had a potential beneficial interest in that. And then just to clarify that if you have a personal interest in an item, that interest can become a pecuniary interest in the following circumstances, where a member of the public with knowledge of the relevant interest would reasonably regard it as so significant that it is likely to prejudice your judgment of the public interest, and where that business is either affecting your financial position or the financial position of a relevant person or body, or relates to the determining of any approval, consent, license, permission or registration in relation to that relevant person or body. So I hope that's helpful.
No, it's not on. Oh, it is now, is it? Yes, thank you for that explanation. I mean, it is non-pecuniary in as much that I'm not paid as a trustee. It is a charitable organisation, so therefore it's a non-for-profit organisation. The only thing that might be a question for me is when we get to the, especially where we were asked for questions on the budget to put for any possible ideas for funding, then I did have a question there, which I may have to not make at this stage then. Thank you.
Thank you. Very much appreciate the thought that you're putting into this. Are we happy to proceed on this item without? Thank you. So we're now moving on to item 5, which on the new agenda is the bus network review, and Neil Byers, transport consultant, will introduce this report.
Morning, everyone. So this is one of 2 items on buses, and around the bus network and our work on buses, we have a view of the medium and long term. This paper very much focuses on the more shorter term decisions we take around the tendered network that we currently support. Back in October 2022, the authority took a decision to invest significantly to support additional bus services to retain the network that was withdrawn by operators. And at the same time of making those decisions, The authority also wanted to undertake a review of that network to ensure that the investment made into tendered services is delivering best value and also supporting communities. So this paper represents the initial findings of that work and the further work that we're going to do and bring back to you in the future. The paper sets out the approach that we've taken to assess those services, looking at both the need of those services for the communities and where they provide access to, and also the value for money that is delivered by those services, and bringing those two things together, providing you information about the overall network that we're currently serving. The paper also sets out the steps that we will be taking over the next few months and bringing back around the engagement we can do on services that we would look to improve and other opportunities we may need to explore to meet gaps in the existing network. The paper sets out the existing budget that's allocated to tenders and opportunities for further investment into the network through the Bus Service Improvement Plan Plus funding, which was received, and that will also be brought back to a future meeting alongside the further review. The paper itself sets out the assessment of all of the services, recommending that there's a significant number that are performing well, and we should continue to support 51 of those services, both meeting a community need and providing value for money. And then identifying 18 services where we think there's an opportunity to review and improve those services with the input of community, businesses and other sectors to identify either small timetable changes, new opportunities for demand, or significant changes to those services to better serve the communities or meet other gaps in the network. These are initial recommendations with the need for looking at those 18 services in more detail, with leaders, with you as representatives of your communities, with parish and town councils and other representatives who we can work with. And I encourage everybody to engage with me to help that process, so we can make sure that engagement process is thorough. What we'll be doing over the next few months is continue doing that process alongside operators as well. So we've shared the findings with operators so that they understand what they need to do on those services, and we'll be working with them alongside communities to identify where those opportunities might be, using their network knowledge and the community knowledge together to bring back those recommendations. The proposal in the paper is to retain those 51 services and progress those, but not only just to say that they're performing well, to make sure that we continue to invest into and support and promote those services to maintain their viability. And that's something that we'll need to do across all of the services to make sure the public are aware of those services and the opportunities to continue to use them. We identify when we change the network that there's two types of services. There's the commercial network and there's the tendered network. I'm sure there'll be comments across the whole of the bus network that we need to respond to. When looking at commercial services, we'll engage with the operators that are relevant for those services to see if there's changes we can make. When it's tendered services, we can look at that ourselves with communities and business leaders as well. Alongside the network review on the scheduled services, we've always also been looking at the demand responsive service, so the TING service that operates in East Huntingdonshire, seeking to bring that alongside our decisions around the tendered network. The paper sets out some of the considerations about demand responsive transport as a strategic response to gaps in the network, and also the specific service in TING within East Huntingdonshire and how we take that forward. Part of the recommendation is to enable us to put the contract for TING on the same basis in terms of timescales for decisions as the rest of the scheduled services, making sure that we can align decisions not just for scheduled and demand responsive separately, but considering the whole network together. The paper also sets out some of the recommendations for the future of demand responsive and opportunities to continue to engage with us. We're keen to say that there's a lot of good services out there already that are working well, and we need to continue to work with yourselves and other representatives to promote those services, and we're keen to engage with the community to identify those opportunities. The paper provides a summary of BSIP Plus considerations and recent funding that was provided to the combined authority, which decisions are yet to be taken on. It's a good step, but it's only a small allocation that will over the next 2 years. The government have allocated that funding for us to spend over the next 2 financial years, largely associated to supporting bus services and also potential ticketing and incentives, so largely revenue funding. And we'll bring back recommendations on that in November alongside recommendations for the 18 services that will be under review. I'll stop there and take questions.
Thank you. There's a lot in there. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now, I imagine we will have quite a few questions on this item? So first round of questions, please. Councillor Wakeford, get straight in there. Anyone else? Councillor Simons. Thank you. Okay, 4 I think is sufficient just for now, and then I'm going to start the next round with yourself, Councillor Seaton, just so we don't overpower the officers at once. Is there anyone else wants to come in on the next round already? Okay, right. Who are we starting with? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. There's obviously an awful lot that could be said on this paper, and even though I've snuck in first, I'll seek not to try and say all of it at once, and allow others to come in. I think, as we've touched on in earlier items, the importance of good public transport around the combined authority area and in much of our area, particularly more rural parts, particularly the many rural parts in Hunts that I represent, for example. Public transport means buses, and at risk of sounding glib, the only thing worse, therefore, than not having a bus and public transport access to places that you need to connect to is thinking that you do have one and then not being able to rely on it. And we've touched as well earlier in the meeting on reliability issues came up in public questions earlier, and clearly that's a factor regardless of whether routes exist in theory, whether operators are able to reliably run them. But I think in view of that context, clearly any potential risk to viability of services that exist is deeply unwelcome, to say the least. But I think the proposed steps here around reviewing routes with time, considering things carefully, considering whether there are things about routes that can be adjusted, that can be adapted, ways in order to tackle the viability challenges, is exactly how we should be trying to deal with risks to viability of routes, unlike the situation we are all well aware of last year, where we had a number of routes at very short notice that were going to be removed, and hard work by the Command Authority, indeed people in this room, were able to substantially save those. So I think this is not a welcome topic, but it is extremely welcome to have a framework for us avoiding those kind of last minute, avoidable alarm to our residents, with sort of short-term threats to people's ability to get to work, get to school, whatever else. So I'm pleased with the paper in that context. Also, we have particular interest in Hunts, obviously, around the extension of Ting service. There's part of the alignment with the timing of the wider review is addressed in the report to assist with a fuller review of the Ting service. Officers are well aware that we are continue to be interested in assisting with any further survey work that may be underdone as part of that, in order to ensure that data is fully capturing the true value, particularly in the context of a lack of alternatives. So thank you for bringing this. I welcome the paper, even though the subject matters are deeply troubling for many.
Thank you. And Councillor Simons, I'll come to you in just a second, but I did just want to exercise Chair's prerogative, because I'm very aware that I am looking directly at Sue McGill here in line of sight, and I think it will be important just to mention that there are clearly also routes that people would be keen to see included in network reviews that are not currently running at all. And I know that I've now made a site visit out, for example, to Wittering-Caster, Aylesworth, and the other villages that are currently without a scheduled bus service. I'm aware that also Tim and MENIC have been out to have a look as well. And I think it will be remiss not to mention the needs of areas like that in looking at this review and ensuring that we are not only looking at the routes that exist, but the possibility for other routes. Clearly understanding that quite a lot of those discussions are bound up in other discussions we are initiating around bus reform as well. But I just wanted to mention that. Anyway, apologies, Councillor Simons, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You've stolen my thunder slightly. I mean, I was going to ask the question about Wittering-Castor, Aylesworth and Wansford. If there are any updates on a service for there, please, them areas.
I think we need to invite Sue onto the committee here. Okay, where were we next? Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you. Chair, you won't be surprised to hear me raise some questions because there's a number in phase 2 in South Cambridgeshire. Couple of general points and then a couple of specifics. So in terms of general points here, I just want to be keen that we consider two things. I know the paper is considering community need, especially where there is not another alternative. I know that the officers have looked at that, so I'm confident they're on the case. I would urge them to look, if they haven't looked already, in terms of the services and connectivity to the travel hubs. So, for example, where we have Foxton Station and we have Whittlesford Station, who are carrying a lot of rail passengers, and whether there are solutions in the phase 2 review that, as it were, kill two birds with one stone. So if a service is under review, part of that review should be the connectivity to the travel hub, and whether that takes away something from travel hub, because otherwise we're trying to develop a travel hub and then on the other hand removing bus services that are going to it possibly. One specific is I want the officers just to please look at, I've been asked to raise with you, is in the number 15 service, which is in the first list, is apparently very infrequent, whereas the 17 service, which is one of the Bassingbourn services, I think at the moment is 5 times a day, and yet it's in the phase 2 list. So there may be just a bit more scrutiny around those two services, in particular around Bassingbourn. I do understand that we have to look at the costs and the subsidy per head. And the final comment is, the on-demand service in some areas has worked very well. I know there are some higher costs associated with it. My question is there a new configuration for some of the South Cambridgeshire villages where an on-demand service may work? I don't know the answer to that, Chair, but just as part of this review to make sure we're, looking at the whole picture, I would ask the team to look at that as well. Thanks a lot.
And if you can take one more, Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. A few points and a few questions, and I'm trying to be as general as I can across the whole county, but I've got a couple of closer to home questions. So I'll probably best if I start off with those. We're looking at the 51 routes, which we're saying basically they'll go not straight through, but they'll need don't need too much work done on them. I know the number 11, and I believe certainly the mayor's had some representations, I believe, around the 11 previously used to stop in Bottisham, and access to the GP surgery for elderly relatives and elderly residents from nearby villages is an issue. So I hope that's still being possibly looked at. And then my other comment is on, and I think this is more of a typo, although is on the phase 2 services that need further review. The service number 12 is actually Newmarket to Cambridge via Bottisham. The Newmarket to Ely service is the 112. It was renumbered and it's in your phase 1. So So I think that's purely a typographical error there. Going on to more general points. Obviously, if we look at the in the paper, there's the reference to further DRT services, and it's trying to get the balance between rural isolation, as one of the colleagues said, and obviously cost. There is a massive balancing issue there, which is going to be very difficult. But obviously, in terms of Ting, then I'm not sure what the current costs are, but obviously, if they're going to be of similar costs for those other areas, then that needs to be factored in. And it would have been, from my point of view, it would have been useful. Obviously, in exempt session, I understand that, useful to have had a breakdown of what the various costs are of this, to give us some better understanding. And finally, on, I think it's bullet point 2.5, it mentions 2.3 million a year for the next 2 years, 24, 25. Is that an initial allocation on our part of our application for the BSIP? So would we, again, I don't want to hold you to this, but would we be expecting, I'm not aware of what the BCP, what the figures are in it, but would we be expecting to get a lot more? Because taking, shall we say, the resident from Wittering, then obviously we're looking, and I think all of us would want to expand services, and we're going to need more funding. So whereas at the moment we're trying to manage the status quo, for want of a better word. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's probably enough for the first round of questions. And could I just remind everybody that we are now at 11:10. This is a really important item, and this is not a comment anyone so far, but let's keep our comments and answers, please, as brief as possible so that everyone has the chance to contribute everything they need to do.
So I think, firstly, agree with the points around there's one element of having a network and another around having a reliable network, and that's something that we continue to work with operators on to help ensure that takes place. So it's an ongoing process, perhaps outside of the decisions of the paper, but something we definitely recognise. Around kind of Wandsworth, Castor, Wittering, absolutely looking at kind of gaps in the network there, and looking at the different types of solutions, whether that's a scheduled service or demand responsive style service as well. Aware of the conversations with Victoria that are happening. We've also spoken to Victoria as well. So there's progress looking at those options, and we'll bring back some recommendations around and that particular, but other parts of the authority area as well, where we get representations. We will look at those. I think from a travel hubs perspective and looking at those opportunities to provide better connectivity, that's absolutely part of what the review is looking to do, is finding those demand generators or destinations that can drive additional patronage. I think one of the constraints that we need to be clear on is that we're not able to overlap or compete with commercial services, which leaves the tender network effectively picking up the gaps in the commercial network. But certainly the opportunity of the review is to find how better to provide those links to those places where people need to get to. Perhaps one of the things I could have said towards the start is I think it's a long time since a network review has been done. So this is very much a first positive step in a process to continually develop the network and look at those opportunities. So I don't see this as a one-time opportunity, that we can continue to develop the network as we move into some of the other decisions. We'll pick up the points around kind of the frequencies of the different services, and there's always a balance between providing a viable service and one that's attractive and affordable as well. So we'll look at those different alternatives about what is affordable, viable, and useful for people to use. Just around the comments in around 11 and 12 and type, but we'll just look at those and come back if there's particular corrections that we need to make on that. And we can provide further information around. Obviously, some of the information that sits underneath the report is commercially confident, but we can look at ways at sharing that's useful. I could have provided perhaps a bit more context around BSIP and BSIP Plus, just to make the difference between those two things. So the bus service improvement plan, which is something that we've been discussing over time, is a plan that sits underneath the bus strategy that sets out our programme of work and would have a funding allocation against it that we would submit to government. So previously a submission was made around the bus service improvement plan, which was unfortunately unsuccessful. And we'd started work to develop a new bus service improvement plan to submit to government. While we're in the process of developing that plan, the government took a decision to allocate funding to all those authorities that didn't receive any BSIP funding in the first round, which this allocation represents that. So that's called BSIP Plus. So all of the authorities that didn't receive anything in the first round have received some. And as far as we know, this is the total allocation that we could expect in the round of current decisions. Obviously, additional decisions can be made by government around further allocations, but this is what we know at the moment. Probably alongside that, not in the paper, but just for context, that there's opportunities around further ZEBRA funding, which is around electric vehicles, electric buses, which will come out from government, which will be separate to the BSIP and another competition to look at. But just to clarify the difference between the bus service improvement plan and BSIP Plus.
Thank you. Is there anything that people asked in that round that didn't get covered off there? I think it was quite a thorough answer, but okay, and I think it might be worth just to ensure for the benefit of people who are watching, because it is a very complicated environment that we're operating in, that the review we are looking at here is very much around assuming the current situation of the bus network. Clearly, I assume additional reviews would need to take place if we were to proceed further with our bus reform proposals, because that would then create a whole new landscape that would require further reform. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So I now have Councillor Seaton, Mayor Nick, Councillor Beckett. Okay, I'll start with you. So Councillor Seaton, please.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go over, a lot has been said already, so I won't repeat what has been said, and very good comments have been made. I have one specific question and one sort of more general. The specific one is where commercial services have been significantly cut but not wholly abandoned, such as between Peterborough and Whittlesea. What is the mechanism to ensure that potential combined authority support for improvement of the service includes consideration of a potential financial contribution by the authority to the operator? And the more general one is, I know we've spoken in the past about having greater communication with the parish councils to find out their requirements, not that they can all be met, but so that there is a better understanding of what is required in the rural areas. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I just want to add a little bit to what you said there, Councillor Seaton, because I think it would be good to hear really strong reassurances. It's certainly my understanding from the paper, but I'd like to hear that confirmed by our officer team as well, that there is a real commitment to getting out into the community, to listening to us, to listening to parish councils, to listening to the county unitary and district councils, and to our residents groups as well. So if we could have some reassurances in those answers that all of that is in train, I think that's something that we all care quite deeply about. So, Menik.
I suspect what I'm about to say you may well echo towards the end of the debate. And this is really just a desire to put it on personal record as the mayor who reads this paper, and for the benefit of everybody here, you may not kind of take it the way I did, but I would remind us all of what it was like a year ago when confronted by decisions made by local operators. Huge swathes of the local population were confronted by questions of their long-term employment opportunities, education opportunities, as well as just, am I able to get out and about? This piece of work, which in its simplicity, but really kind of doesn't really do justice to the amount of hard work and attention to detail that is in front of us. What we have done here, and I say the combined authority and the officers behind it, you have managed to make a very complicated and challenging mess, for want of a better phrase, based on generations of lack of investment in the bus network, a lack of care, and that's across all parties, by the way, since deregulation in the 80s. And this is a statement of intent, for as I see it, where we can make a decision as a board, as a Transport Infrastructure Committee, recommending to board a direction of travel that really begins to deliver, but also takes into consideration finance. We need to be mindful, of subsidies, but we also need to be mindful that alongside the subsidized services, there are some very, very successful bus services. So we've talked at length about the direction of travel through enhanced partnership and a desire towards franchising. But I really just wanted to put it on record that you are doing yourselves a disservice because you don't, in some ways, recognise how hard you have worked to get this far. And I am very grateful for the commitment of yourself, Neil, and the officers across the whole of the transport team who have actually demonstrated that when challenged by the decisions made by external operators, and at the same time, acknowledging this afternoon, we will be sitting down with all the operators and talking about how we should be working together going forward in a collaboration, caring for the local community, and we are going in the right direction. I'm not naive through social media to recognise the huge amount of challenges that we still have on certain services, and we are listening, but we are building a narrative here that will actually deliver if we all work together. So thank you for letting me to speak on that.
Councillor Beckett, follow that.
I'm not sure I can follow that one, Chair. That was a very good speech by the Mayor there. I'm going to try and be brief in large part, actually, because I'm very lucky to represent an area that has quite a good bus service, largely due to the proximity of the hospital. And I know what a difference that it makes to my residents' lives. One thing I am very highly aware of, though, is that everybody is in favour of public transport. The issue is obviously the cost of it, and that's the area where we all fall down so much. And the DRT, from what I've heard, seems to work very, very well, other than the cost pressures on it. I'm also very aware of the work that the GCP is doing, in particular in relation to automated buses and the trials they've got coming up. And actually, Andy will know about this a lot with the Smart Working Group around the West Cambridge site and the biomedical campus, and the large potential that might have to reduce the cost of some of these measures in the future. And I do wonder whether account can be taken of that this is obviously a very dynamic environment that we live in right now with buses, which is something I never thought I'd say, that there are large amounts of changes coming within buses, and whether we can make sure that we are abreast of those changes and forward looking and making sure that the services that we're offering might be able to be very adaptable in the future as the costs reduce of a lot of these things, and that we can improve services as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to add a couple of points, both as chair and as Cambridge City Council representative. So I'll try to move the metaphorical hats on and off as I do that. So with my chair and lead for transports hat on, I think it would be useful to get some clarifications around some issues with demand responsive transport, because one thing I'm very aware of speaking to residents is that not all demand responsive transport is equal. So whilst we've seen superb responses to our Ting services and really good public, the popularity of that is very clear. I'm very aware that some demand responsive transport services are not like that. You can't book on the day. You might find yourself on a kind of 3-hour meander through half of the region in order to get to where you want to be. And therefore, that some of the areas which are mentioned as possible Ting extensions of that Ting trial may actually be quite concerned that they aren't getting a quality of service because they won't be able to rely on that for things like work or doctor's appointments. So if you could give us a little bit of reassurance around the plans that we have for Ting and how DRT and how DRT works in a combined authority context, I think that would be very helpful. I did just want to re-emphasise what I've heard from a few representatives around the room this morning already, which is the very different way that we are looking at improving the network to some of the ways we have seen in the past that are commercially driven by operators. And I think Dr. Nick is absolutely right to emphasise the decisions that were made last year that we had to respond to extremely quickly, that there was deep concern about, I know around this table and around other tables too. I think the way that you as officers are seeking to present a different way forward, that we're really going to look at whatever we can do to support local residents and communities and to really ensure that we have investigated routes that potentially at the moment are not working as well as they could do, and that we are exploring all avenues rather than simply saying, well, that's not working as well as it could, so there we are. And I think this models what a public service can do when we start to look at bus routes. I'm now going to put my Cambridge hat on for just a second because we're talking about routes that are kind of under threat or not working as well across the region. I would want to bring to this table the concerns that I have heard raised as a Cambridge representative from people along Histon Road around the changes to bus route A that are being proposed by Stagecoach at the moment. There is some deep concern about that. Residents who are relying on that bus route to get them to Addenbrooke's finding that they are now a significant distance from a bus stop, and we're talking here about elderly and vulnerable people. And I know that there is deep concern being raised by local residents there, so I wanted to make sure that that is also on the table at this point. And of course, appreciating that that is a commercial operator decision, but I just wanted to make sure that that was aired. Okay, a lot there again. Are there any final questions that people want to raise on this item? Councillor Simons, you have a further question. If I could just bring that question in first, we'll make this the last round unless anything comes up in response to final officer comments. Councillor Simons.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. Yeah, I think it's important that if we can work with the parish councils going forward, and they can obviously feed in their realistic wish lists, that would be ideal, I think. Also, they could possibly look at their precepts to support the service is going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Steve, you look like you want to come in on a bit of that.
Thank you, and thanks to members for all the comments. Just wanted to come in on one point, which was the reassurance around the engagements over the next couple of months. It is really important that we get that engagement right, and the support of members, of leaders, of communities in that process will be hugely valued. And the discussion will be around the 18, but also, how can we still improve those services, the 51 that we're saying are okay. I'm sure that there are, I think there's one or two examples made this morning. We can still improve some of those. And also, how can we collectively work to market buses generally as something that we want to people to travel on? And I think there's a collective effort with operators and across our system to do that. And if we can explore that and bring some of those ideas back when we come back to the board and tick in November, I think that will be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that when other authorities have done large scale consultation events before, one of the things they have done is to produce a pack that potentially councillors, whether that is at whatever level that is, could use to run sessions with their own communities, which significantly increases the capacity to get those discussions happening in communities. I wonder if maybe we could think about something like that. I think that'd be really helpful. Who's answering the rest? Neil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So going back to the first question around the technical point around existing commercial services that have been reduced but not withdrawn. So the contracting route for that would be through something called a de minimis contract. There's only a certain budget cap that the authority can use in de minimis contracts, so we're not able to use that in all cases. The starting point would always be to work with an operator to find ways to make that a more attractive and viable service so that it returns to commercial operation rather than for you to take on that burden. But there is a contract mechanism to consider that option with a limit of how much of the overall network can be under that type of contract mechanism. thinking about kind of rural areas more broadly, I think it's really important that there needs to be a mixed approach. So demand responsive is not the answer to every place, and it needs to reflect both having a reliable and consistent service, or a typical scheduled service, and looking how demand responsive type solutions might be able to complement that. And there's not just one type of demand responsive service as well. So there's different ways of delivering that type of solution and good examples, but effectively finding ways to aggregate people onto shared journeys and get them into places where they can make onward connections, or places of interest. So we talked about transport hubs earlier on, or market towns where they can do, but it's not always looking for one answer and trying to look at more solutions. I think that was the reason for trialing DRT in the first place, to see how that can operate in a more rural location. And now we need to evolve that trial, but also look at complementing scheduled services as well alongside that. So it's not it will never be a one size fits all. It's all about recognizing where that community needs to get to and the access that they need. I think just alongside the work, I would just mention that the role of operators has been really positive in the work that we're doing. So I just wanted to note that their engagement and their continued support for the work that we're doing is very much recognised. They recognise the need to renew and consider changes to the network, because they want to see people on their buses, because that's good for their services. So just wanted to make that point in consideration. I think around the future, there's lots of change and new solutions coming forward. The opportunities for technology to improve efficiency needs to be considered. Demand responsive is an example of that, where you aggregate demand in the back office, and there's an opportunity to think about how we can centralize that aggregation across the whole of the network, rather than each operator having their own solution. That will help us in terms of cost, but it will also help us in terms of delivering a service across the whole area. Can note the points around kind of HIST and the changes of the commercial operations, and that's something that we'll obviously take up with the operators. And I think Steve's already made the point around engagement. I think the point that I would make is please come to me, to Steve, others in the team, to make sure we're aware of those people that we need to speak to. Obviously through parish councils and others, we have that connection, or if there are particular groups that we need to speak to, I don't know what I don't know, so please engage with me to make sure I'm aware of those needs for conversations, but we'll be out there having them as best we can.
Thank you. And I know that as we move through this as a committee, you'll be keeping us informed of those opportunities for engagement so that we can be reaching out. I think we'd all appreciate your intention to be really proactive on that, but we will also be proactive in getting to you and telling you where you need to be talking. I think that's important if we can make this a good, strong team piece. I'm going to take this to the vote. There are a range of recommendations here. I think 5 recommendations. You have them in front of you. I would appreciate it if we could take those recommendations en bloc, unless anyone has a concern with that. I don't see that concern. Sorry, Councillor Sharp.
Sorry, I've got it. As I mentioned earlier, I've got concern with C in terms of with not having the financial information. That would be my concern on Ting.
Is there a response on that financial information point that we can just give before we go to the vote? Steve, do you want to pick that up?
If I could clarify, Councillor Sharp, is that the cost of extending the Ting contract between November and the end of the year? Is that the clarification you're seeking? Yeah. Don't know whether we have that precise figure to hand on what the cost would be of extending. No.
Okay, in which case what I will do is I will take items A, B, D and E together en bloc. We will have a separate vote on item C. So first of all, I'm going to move recommendations A, B, D and E. Do I have a seconder from the floor? Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor MacDonald will second that. Can I see those in favour of those recommendations, please? And that's unanimous amongst voting members. Now going to move item C. Can I have a seconder, please, for recommendation C? Councillor Wakeford, thank you. Can Can I see votes in favour of recommendation C, please? And that is 7 votes in favour, including both of the constituent Tier 1 authorities. Can I see votes against and abstentions, I assume? So we have 1 abstention. So those are carried. Thank you. I'd like to keep powering on. Does anyone need a comfort break? Okay, right. So we are now moving on to item 6. This is on bus reform. Please note there is an exempt appendix to this report, which has been circulated to members of this committee separately. If we are to remain in public session, we need to refrain from discussing the details in that exempt appendix. If any member is not happy with that approach and wishes to discuss items that are in that appendix, please indicate now, as we will need to take a vote as to whether to move into exempt session. Does anyone wish to discuss items in that appendix? Okay, and obviously if issues come up later in the session where we need to move to that appendix, we can then pause, take a vote and clear the room. But for now, we will stay in public session. I'm relying on the officers to my right to let us know if we are straying into exempt items territory. Okay, or indeed the officers on my left, but somebody will tell us before we start straying into that. Thank you. Okay, and Neil, I think this is your item. I know this is an incredibly detailed one. If we can leave as much time as possible for questions, so a brief introduction and then questions from the floor, please.
So, as touched on under the last item, this is where we start to look at more of the medium and long term for the bus network, and this paper around bus reform looks at the way that the network is governed rather than the specific network itself, and sets out the work that we've been doing, looking at the options for the future governance of buses in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, with the 2 main options being an enhanced partnership or a franchise network. The work has been initially recommended back in 2019. Obviously, we had COVID since then, but the work was recommissioned to look at those options in light of the impact of COVID and the future of the bus network in the area. An outline business case has been developed in draft in accordance with the Bus Services Act 2017 in order to establish the pros and cons, the benefits of each of those options, and then look to bring forward a business case which can be moved toward it in line with the process of the Act. We've reached the stage where we have an outline business case which sets out the 5 dimensions of a business case for each of those options, and are now seeking to take that business case to audit so we can establish if the information that the business case is based on is sufficiently robust for the board to make a decision later on. So this paper is setting out some of the overview around the different options of enhanced partnership and franchising, and focuses then on the technical step of moving to an audit so we can bring back both the business case and that audit response for a further decision on the future of the governance of the bus network in the area. I'm happy to pause there and move into the questions.
Thank you. And before we throw this open to debate, and I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion on this item, I think it's important that we clarify what we are and aren't doing today. What we are not doing today is making a decision on whether we move to a franchised or enhanced partnership system. What we are doing is making a decision to recommend to the board that we do the due diligence that we need to do in order to make that informed decision. And I think it's important to set that context because I think there will be questions that come up today that are precisely the kind of questions that will be answered as we go through that due diligence process. And it is why we need to press the button on that due diligence process. Otherwise, we're going to end up in a kind of loop without getting anywhere because we won't have the information that we need. So I imagine there will be quite a lot of questions on the process. I think there probably will be questions on the broader issues as well. One thing I did also want to say on the broader issues, and Neil, you touched on it last time. I think it's important that we remember in our dialogue that the issue that we are addressing here is the system. And I think it is very easy sometimes for us to slip into we're all perfect and the bus operators are all very nasty people. And I don't think that's a helpful dialogue. The issue is the system that we are operating under, and that is what we are looking to address here. So I think that's probably an important context as well. Okay, going to open this out to discussion, debate, comments. Who'd like to go first? Councillor MacDonald? Do you want to start asking?
Yeah, mindful chair of not going into the exempt item. I suppose just overall to say, I believe this represents a huge opportunity. It's not until that due diligence and the business case is examined and we've had a look at it that we know what the size of that opportunity is, and obviously the costs associated with it. The opportunity to have much greater control, working alongside the bus operators. You know, this is eventually got to be a very cooperative and collaborative venture. But you know, with potentially a greater degree of control from us as the combined authority. And I know Mayor Nick has been, you know, deeply involved in this. So I'm very happy to support the report and the recommendations, and the sooner we can dive into the case, the better. Thanks a lot.
Any other comments, questions? Andy?
Maybe mine will be the last question. So thank you for this. I think it's, I'm not an expert on things. It's a shame the appendix exempt. I understand why, because it contains some financial information. But I'd quite like to see if we could do a redacted version of that appendix. It's very well written. It's 300 pages of information, and it's a shame that more information can't be made available to the public because it really lays out the discussion really well. From a business perspective, I think we strongly support, as you'd expect, improved sustainable transport options. Connectivity between home and work is really important, obviously, and all businesses have sustainable transport, sustainability goals that they need to make. Productivity is very much hampered by the congestion we're seeing, and also impacts on the quality of life, which makes it more difficult to actually recruit employees. And the ability for educational opportunities is reduced if for many of the sixth formers or potential sixth formers from their ability to access further education. I guess the real question for business is, what can we afford versus what do we need? So what we're talking about here is a world-class bus network, and if you look at it in a slightly, perhaps slightly tangential way, it's the world-class public bus network which will reduce the congestion by 15%. If the congestion doesn't reduce by 15%, then we won't have a world-class bus network. And I think business confidence has been knocked by recent events within the Greater Cambridge area and the ability to provide a bus network for that area. So what I'd like to see during the audit work is a confidence that by doing this world-class bus network, and I see it's not just service provision, it also involves bus stops, travel hubs, other measures as well. It's good to see that. Do we really believe that the service delivery that we'll get just by increasing the buses will reduce congestion without other measures being put in place as well?
Any other points or questions at this stage? Neil, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I think just relating back to that point there, I think when you look at bus networks, probably around the world, but in the UK, and the model that they operate under, the best ones generally have that kind of approach where there's a central control and investment in it. So I think there are opportunities for us to identify some more of those case studies where we can point to how you can get to the stage that we're looking to get to, and that might be useful in the conversation. I think probably the point around exemption of information, at the point if we get to a point of public consultation, if that decision is made, then that information will be made available as part of the public consultation so that businesses and public can see the information that would underpin a decision to move towards a franchise. So that information will come at the right time. But I think, as described earlier, we're in that kind of due diligence phase of the work where we're making sure that the information and evidence is appropriate before any decisions are taken on either of those options. But that information would be made available well ahead of any decisions to move forward with a franchise.
Okay, any more questions or comments at this stage? Councillor Sharp?
Thank you, Chair. Really, two real comments. I think we should be going forward. We're certainly looking at the, with the review, so it looks at the pros and cons of what the various options are. I totally agree with what Andy's just said in terms of, obviously, we have at some stage we can have a finite cost in terms of what money we've actually got, but as you say, at this stage we're purely looking to get external audit of the various business case and potential plans that we're putting forward. Obviously, once we come to the decision, I'm sure there'll be a debate around the exempt items, but at this stage, I don't think we need to veer into them. So, yeah, I support that we take the next step.
Thank you. And I would want as chair to say that ever since I became involved with the Combined Authority, I would say round about 60 to 70% of my inbox is about buses. It is clearly something that is incredibly important to so many people in our region. And whilst we may have our disagreements across our region on some issues around transport, I think where I have rarely heard disagreement is the importance of improving our public transport network and ensuring that the public feel they have a say in that public transport. This is a really important step because we are doing that due diligence work, which potentially allows us to do something quite special as a transport committee. So I want to thank officers for the work that they have done to get us to this point. The government necessary steps in the due diligence for bus reform are quite detailed. This is one of the steps that we need to go through. I, as chair, very much welcome the proposals that are being put forward today to ensure that that due diligence is undertaken on the outline business case. So thank you. And as Andy said, it is a real pity in lots of ways that not everyone can see that exempt appendice because it's a huge amount of work that's gone into that. So the papers that are available publicly really are only the tip of the iceberg in terms of the work that I know that all of the team are putting in. And could I please say thank you, Tim? I'm sure you will pass on to all of your team our thanks for the work that's being done. Are there any further questions or comments? If not, I suggest we move to the vote. Okay, I will propose that we move to the vote and propose this item. Mayor Nick, would you like to second? Thank you. That will be seconded by Mayor Nick Johnson. Again, I am proposing that we take all of the recommendations together. You happy with? Excellent. Got a nice smile from Councillor Sharp there. So can I see those in favour, please, of the recommendations? And that is unanimous from our voting members. So those recommendations are carried. We very much look forward to hearing updates on this work as we go forward. Okay, we have one more item, I believe, which requires a vote, which is on the Peterborough depot for electric buses. So Tim Bellamy, I believe, no. Right, so could we please hear the proposal on this item, please? Oh, we have a team, fantastic. So Nick, I think you're going to be leading us on this, is this right? Thank you. So Nick Sweeney, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The purpose of this item is to update members on proposals to deliver a depot for electric buses in Peterborough and to ask members to commit funding towards further feasibility work. In December 2022, the Combined Authority secured £4 million of funding from DLUC to provide a depot for electric buses in Peterborough.
It was envisaged that the funding would be committed within the 2022-23 financial year, but it then became clear that the funding obtained was insufficient to deliver an operational facility. Officers from the Combined Authority and Peterborough City Council have been working jointly to explore ways of generating additional capital investment and delivering the facility. Peterborough City Council officers have discussed proposals with a bus operator and believe there could be scope for private sector funding to be made available to bridge the funding gap. But this would be subject to more detailed feasibility work and negotiation. A recommendation is before members to commit up to £200,000 of funding to contribute towards the further detailed feasibility work that is yet to be undertaken by Peterborough City Council. A timeline and project milestones are appended to the paper, and Mr. Sawyer and Mr. Newton from Peterborough City Council have kindly attended today to explain how Peterborough City Council intends to take the project forward. And I'm sure that between us, we can answer any questions that members may have. So if I pass on to Peterborough City Council now, thank you.
Okay, and before you do that, just to remind everyone, Councillor Beckett came in at very short notice for this. I am very anxious that we are able to get to a vote on this item. So please, can we keep contributions brief so that we do get to that vote? Over to you, no pressure.
Thank you very much. I'll introduce myself first of all, because I don't have a name badge. My name is Jim Newton. I'm Peterborough City Council's Director of Infrastructure and Environment. So our brief at PCC has been to assist in finding a suitable and viable site for a replacement bus depot. So to that end, we've been through a process to narrow down what the parameters of that should be, and to work out, in particular, whether that should be a standalone facility or whether we should combine it with other aspirations that the City Council has. So we've concluded that process at a high level. So we believe that we have a good understanding of the size of site and the broad location that we need to find it in. So we're asking now for the funding for us to be able to undertake more detailed work. As I'm sure members will understand, this is an iterative process that we need to go through, where as we discount options, then we need to continue to add detail to the direction that we travel to make sure that we end up with the right site in the right location at the right time, brought in on budget. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for talking during that. We're just trying to make sure that we've got the right recommendations up on the screen at the end. So would you like to add anything at this stage?
Hello, sorry, just to introduce myself. So I'm John Sawyer. I'm a consultant specialising in housing and infrastructure delivery, working with Peterborough City Council on other projects, and been asked to provide some assistance on this project. I suppose the only other thing I would say is something like this is conceptually straightforward but commercially complicated. So obviously it needs some very careful thought, and that also needs to be undertaken within the context that the bus sector is obviously a franchised sector. So a little bit like if you mortgage your home, you need to be able to, move from home to home within that mortgage period and so on. So we need to make sure any commercial structure is flexible for the benefit of all parties, as opposed to rigid for a very long period of time. So that will be in our mind as well, to make sure that the franchise principles are maintained.
Hey, do we have any questions or comments on this item, Councillor Simons? I'm sure that you'll have something you'll want to say, so I'll invite you to speak if there's anything you would like to add. And Councillor MacDonald has indicated that he wishes to speak. Is there anyone else? And Mayor Nick as well. So take Councillor MacDonald, then Councillor Simons, if you would like to say anything, you'll have the opportunity, and then Mayor Nick.
Chair, just a quick comment that the Peterborough residents and I think the officers will be aware that the user experience from Cambridge so far on the electric buses is very, very positive. So you've really got something to look forward to. A lot of people have remarked on it. I was really pleased that you all decided to come to my division in Duxford when you launched the electric buses. But yeah, it's a great service.
Councillor Simons, do you wish to add anything?
Don't have much to say really. I mean, we did visit the Cambridge depot, and like you say, it's very successful and very worthwhile exercise going to that depot. This is important to Peterborough, obviously, and it's obviously funding up to 200,000. So hopefully, it will be less than that. Thank you.
Manic?
Yeah, thank you. I guess it follows on from the comments about the introduction of zebra buses in the south of the region, and a comment that was made at the time: "Why not us?" And so, understandably. So, for me, the ambition for the combined authority and the hard work in in getting these funds to, and then immediately thinking, well, where would we want to do further work, and direct that to Peterborough is to be applauded. I guess it's a bit of a question. I just need the reassurance that Peterborough City Council is, really behind this. I mean, I can see lots of benefits in it, but it'd be helpful if we had that clearly stated, and maybe representation here would be reassuring. And then there's a sort of a final comment, really. Nick, I'm not one normally to complain, but you've done an excellent paper, very ambitious. But in your public health implications, 7.1, you say there are no significant implications for public health. Well, I disagree. I think there are huge implications for public health if this plan goes ahead. If it's not just the bus infrastructure, but also Peterborough City Council's network of vehicles is also part of an improved move towards electrical vehicles. I would suggest that there would be huge improvements in air quality. And I would love if we could also, as part of this process going forward, I'm not going to ask you to correct that now. That's my humble opinion. But I would argue that as we go forward, and hopefully it's kind of what's happened in Cambridge City, that we monitor the benefits for the public in terms of air quality. I can only comment that I recently travelled to London for a conference, and I was immediately struck, having lived there for 20 odd years, how when I was walking around central London on the Strand, the noise reduction and the improvement in the air quality following on from the rollout of an electric bus fleet in London has shown huge benefits. And dare I say it, going back to the comment about a local area, I've recently been visiting Cambridge City in the role as mayor, but also as just Common and Gordon punter. And seeing those buses run around is a real boom, I think, for the area. And I also believe there's an improvement a lot about air quality. So yes, there are public health implications here, and we shouldn't lose sight of them. And I hope, as part going forward with the ambition of Peterborough City Council, what we're going to hear about is that we will be monitoring those public health improvements, particularly in air quality.
The problem of having a mask on when you take your glasses off at the same time. Are there any other comments? I have one I would just like to add, which is just draw the committee's attention to 9.2 on this item 9.2 on this paper, which does remind us of the importance of the local transport and connectivity plan moving forward on this item. And I would be concerned if further delays on the LTCP were to cause problems with this depot, because it is absolutely crucial. So I just want to draw the committee's attention to the clear link that is emphasised here with the LTCP and the importance of having the LTCP go through as soon as possible. Any comments from officers there, please, or anything further? Councillor Simons.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, Peterborough City Council are fully committed to this, I can assure you. Yeah, there's no issues at all there. And the health environment benefits are huge, as you quite rightly state. We're looking for a site which is also, I think, relevant to our near to our ERF, so we can use the energy to obviously charge the buses. I mean, it's a win-win. And we've got the Perry project. Probably you're not aware of that, but we want to feed all the electricity we're actually producing into the bus depot. So obviously, very, very reasonable price of electricity for the service. Obviously, a much greater benefit.
Thank you. Anything to add there? Thank you very much.
Just very briefly to say, we've already visited the Cambridge bus depot that was referred to earlier, which indeed is very impressive. And as a general principle, it's always wise not to reinvent the wheel if there's good lessons from elsewhere. So we will be looking at other locations as well and trying to bring those lessons into this particular project. Thank you.
Okay, now I believe on this item, and Councillor Beckett, I just want to reassure you that although there's a vote on the next item, you aren't needed for it as a county representative, so you will be able to go after this one. I believe there are some amended recommendations here, which I think we are going to share on the laser display board at this moment. Okay, can everybody see that? Is there a second page we're going to have to move to, or is it all there? Okay. Is everybody happy? Just give you a moment to read that. Any questions on those changes of recommendations? It's just to make it a little easier to ensure we make the administration of this as smooth as possible. Is everybody happy to take those recommendations en masse? Okay, so what we're going to need to do first is we are going to need to agree the amended recommendations. I assume I need to propose these and we have a vote as to whether we're happy to accept them. Is that correct?
This is a general consensus. Everyone.
Do I have a general consensus around the room for those as the new recommendations? Good, in which case we do not need to go to the vote specifically on those. Those are now the recommendations. So I now propose a vote on the amended recommendations. I will propose, Councillor Simons, do you wish to second that? Okay, can I see those in favour, please? That is unanimous of the voting members around the room. Thank you very much. That is passed. Councillor Beckett, I just want to get confirmation from Democratic Services. This is a simple majority, does not require Tier 1 authorities. Is that correct? This next item. So this can still go through even if Cambridgeshire is not here, correct? Lovely. I know I've got it in front of me. I just want to make sure we got it for the record as well. Okay, Councillor Beckett, thank you for stepping in at short notice. You are excused. I think, Tim, you're going to introduce this next item. Short comfort break? Yeah, 5 minutes. Everyone back here in 5 minutes, please. I'm going to be teacherish about this. Okay, we're good to resume the live feed. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to all of those watching us on the live feed for the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority Transport and Infrastructure Committee. We are now on to what is now item 8, which is the ITSO approved contracts for English National Concessionary Travel Schemes. Tim, I think you're going to introduce this item.
Thank you. Thank you, members. So, mindful of time, I'm just going to try and be quite brief. This paper did come to the previous meeting of the Transport and Committee in July. Just a reminder, the Combined Authority is the concessionary authority acting on behalf of the Department of Transport for the purposes of administering the English National Concessionary Travel Scheme. The county framework expired in March 2023, and to ensure the continuation of the service, this committee committed to obtain a 12-month extension. Off the back of that, we've looked at the various options about how we deliver the service going forward. Part of that, following a specific recommendation by the TIC in July, was to look at an in-house deliverability and an assessment of that. So at the present time, the Combined Authority does not have the appropriate accreditation, the level of technology capacity or the expertise in-house to deliver such a scheme, and the cost as well would be significant compared with going out to market. However, going forward, where appropriate, the Combined Authority will thoroughly examine the potential to deliver schemes and services in-house as part of the business development stage, as and where it's necessary. I'm happy to take any questions, but mindful that we've been through this previously, I'll keep it brief.
Okay. Councillor Wakeford, I know you'd like to say something. Anyone else on this item? Councillor Wakeford.
Well, especially briefly then, I think when we commented on this last time it was here, we noted this was likely, given the level of expertise, to be the conclusion. So I don't think this is going to surprise anyone, but it is helpful that the consideration's been given and that reassurance around building that consideration for insourcing opportunities going forward, where that represents better value as opposed to being unworkable and the opposite as it would be here. I think it's going to be really helpful for us going forward. So I'm pleased to move forward with this on that basis. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Again, I think it's always the right thing to do. I think Sam understood where this was coming from when I kind of particularly raised this question about building the capacity and the benefits that perhaps bringing stuff in-house to the Combined Authority could bring. But it's a well-written paper. It's understandably we've exploded around cost. What's most important is delivering the best service to the communities of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and I support this recommendation just going forward. But I'm very grateful that we asked the question and we did due diligence on it. Thank you.
And is the assumption that from now on we will do that same due diligence to look at whether in-house will provide better value? Yep. Is that correct? I think that's really helpful. And Councillor Wakeford, I want to particularly thank you for raising this issue in the first place at committee last time, because I think that this has allowed us to ensure we have a process in place for doing this same due diligence in future. So thank you. If there are no more questions, I propose we move to the vote. I will move to the vote. Who would like to second this? Menick, thank you. Can I see those in favour? That's unanimous from voting members. Thank you very much. Sharon, you'll be glad to know that now we're on item 9. Would you like to join us to give us an update on the Connecting Cambridgeshire Digital Connectivity Progress Update? Jeron, is it Clulo? Clulo is the Programme Director at Connecting Cambridgeshire, is going to introduce this report.
Good afternoon, members. This report provides an update on Connecting Cambridgeshire program's continued success of delivering world-class digital infrastructure throughout Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. One of the 6 key approaches identified to achieve Combined Authority's sustainable growth ambition is improving fixed and mobile digital connectivity. Thanks to the buy-in from yourself into the digital connectivity infrastructure strategy, we maintained Cambridgeshire and Peterborough's position as one of the best served superfast broadband places in the UK with almost 99%, which exceeds the national coverage. We are currently on track for the full fiber coverage target and even so close to the government's gigabit connectivity target with 81% as of today. The combined authority has played a key role in getting the ball rolling with the strategy, investment, and the funding to the program. The support to the program has been invaluable for us to drive the use of digital technologies to improve business productivity and economic growth in the region. This has been essential for us to do, and going forward, we would like to build upon these excellent foundations to seize any opportunities to extend the reach of fiber. So the headline achievements of the projects are illustrated in the report. For the ease of reading, I would like to summarize the report under 3 themes. First one is digital infrastructure. Connecting Cambridgeshire program have a big role to play to achieve the government's challenging targets, because we need to ensure that planned further coverage continues to target areas where there is no known superfast coverage already, as well as in areas where the telecoms market have no investment plans. We must ensure no one is left behind this digital revolution, which requires sufficiently resourcing the team to continue to explore potential funding opportunities so we can help transform the way we live and improve economic productivity. The program has been acting as a central contact point between government, internet service providers, and our communities. With the right resources, we play a great role targeting communities most in need, driving demand stimulation, and providing digital upskilling to support the rollout. The digital coverage across the region is illustrated in the report, which we specifically wanted to include because we would like to reiterate that we have not lost sight of the ambition to ensure every Cambridge and Peterborough home and business has access to superfast speeds. Our collaborations will carry on growing fixed and mobile broadband availability in the region, and we will make sure that we visit every single opportunity for further funding in addition to the already committed by government and the combined authority so that our network goes even further and faster. The second item is innovation. In the current strategy, one of our key targets is to support the rollout of 5G, as it is the latest generation of mobile network, and it's a new global wireless standard and enables an innovative network that is designed to connect virtually everyone and everything together. Our intention is to become a low-carbon, sustainable destination and support technical innovation that could affect change on a larger scale, allowing future generations to remain in the county. There are a couple of 5G council-led projects upcoming, which will pave the way for the future. As the information is under government embargo until official announcements, I'm not able to share further details here yet, but we will do so at the next progress report. Additional to expanding the LoRa networks, low power networks, and the deployment of sensor technology, we are looking to pilot new and innovative solutions to support growth and creating jobs to raise productivity. And lastly, digital inclusion. The program has been working on making digital as accessible as possible to ensure that every person has safe and affordable access to the connectivity so that we can all realize the full potential of digital technologies. If communities, particularly rural areas, are digital connected, then they will be able to access education, jobs, health, social care, and other public services. So we have been working with the county library services, other key partners to ensure residents can become digitally included across the 3 main pillars: connectivity, devices, and the skills required. I'm happy to take any questions from the report, but would like to state that the State of Digital Inclusion report that we are working on will culminate in simple recommendations for the next steps in forming a digital inclusion strategy and the program. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments on this report? Andy?
So obviously digital connectivity is as important as physical connectivity from a business perspective, particularly with the new ways of working. The one feedback I also work on the Cambridge, the Smart Cambridge. I actually lead that for GCP, which I think is an interest rather than a pecuniary or statutory interest. The question I often get asked by business is ability to work on trains and buses. It's a bit similar to the feedback we had before on the bus networks. There's a great frustration that the trains don't have either a good mobile connectivity or Wi-Fi, and the buses, more modern buses, seem to have Wi-Fi, but obviously some of the older ones don't. So I wonder if we could look at a sort of standard for Cambridgeshire where we have either Wi-Fi or some level of 5G, 4G, or just phone connectivity, because that would make it easier for people to work whilst they're on sustainable transport options and might create another differentiation between using the car. Thank you.
Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. Totally in support of the connectivity. The one comment I've got and the progress is certainly, I can think of one village, and it's my largest village of the 11 I've got. There is absolute mayhem in that village at the moment with the contractor just digging up everywhere and not notifying residents. Residents waking up in the morning to find that the contractor has started work and blocked them in totally, so they can't get the vehicle out to go to work or whatever, or coming home. I am in correspondence with that particular contractor, but that would be my only comment is, yes, the idea of it, vision of it is great, but from a practical point of view, there are some issues. It's worked okay in other villages. Perhaps I'm not going to mention in open session the contractor, but it certainly is an issue.
And I want to just add to that from conversations I've had. I don't know if it's the same situation or a different one where there is clearly still a need to ensure that anyone digging up a road or a pavement is informing everyone else of that, so that we end up in a situation where mitigations can take place in good time and people are informed. So I think that's something I'm hearing from a range of sources. Rebecca.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. And I thought it was a really good report. And with my business board hat on, I obviously pleased to hear you talk about business productivity and economic growth. So I've got a couple of questions. You refer to the barrier busting that Connecting Cambridgeshire has, and I wondered if you could be more specific on the key barriers. And I particularly ask that because my understanding is land ownership and particularly things like business parks can easily be left out because they're not public land. And similarly, the figures you have are total figures. And is there a way of breaking that down between open and closed networks? And I'm thinking from a cost perspective, the initial aim is to get everybody connected. Now we're very close to that position. We need to get everybody the choice of connection. And finally, just to welcome both the digital inclusion piece, which I think is really important and links into that cost and open network, and to, I suppose, maintain the focus on the next stage. Cambridgeshire and Peterborough has been ahead of the curve for some time, and it's important that we maintain that position. And with BDUK nationally coming through, keeping the focus and finding solutions for those very hard to reach areas will be key going forward. Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, in which case, over to you, Jerry.
Thank you so much. So I will start with Andy's question. I have some good news, but it was a very long-term issue that we all had. And the good news that I won't be able to share too much details about is we recently submitted a bid for 5G innovation regions to central government in collaboration with Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire ARC area. Therefore, we included the use case for network rail for East-West Rail. So we are hoping if that funding be successful, then we will have that solution deployed very soon. It will be a pilot project with East-West, but it will be a key use case for the government and for the country. So hopefully by next meeting, I will be able to share some details of that pilot if we are successful. If I move to your area, councillor, for the connectivity issues, as I mentioned, even though it is only 1% showing as not spots, it is a high number of premises that doesn't get connectivity at the moment. So what we are trying to do is if you can get in touch with Connecting Cambridgeshire program, share details, we can look at what are the solutions, if there is any public subsidy programs running or any commercial deliveries coming up to the area, then we can let you know about the timings if we have. If not, my pledge here for plus your councillor for your question is having more proactive relationships with the communities, especially via your support. It will be great if I can go and talk to parish councils, let communities know about what is available, what we can do to further increase the coverage. It's good to see you, Rebecca, here. And in terms of barrier busting, more specific, we are in a very good position that we all have Connecting Cambridge is a barrier busting team, and we have officers in planning department, in street works permit departments, which are identified as key barriers by the government at the moment. That will require still good relationship with the network operators, mobile operators, because the main barrier is the communication from the operators when they are actually deploying. When they are digging our roads, they don't let us know, and how many of them coming and digging in one after each other. Therefore, we are trying to build up that relationship with the network operators. And again, if we can create that the information leakage between or sharing information between us, I think everything will be more proactively resolved in terms of finding out, like business parks, then they won't be missed out if we know what is missing. I just need to ask clarification on the open and closed data. So with the okay.
So great that an area has full fibre connectivity, but if it is only one provider and they're being held over a barrel on costs, that's not as good as it being an open network and there being choice for the customer. So, like I said, the first target is to get everywhere covered. The second target is to get everywhere covered with choice.
Thank you. In terms of fixed broadband connectivity data, we don't have our own data because we don't manage the contract anymore in terms of delivery, central government and also commercial delivery. However, central government is collecting the open market review data, and once they have that data collected and they are sharing quarterly, we are hoping to access that data and make those evidence-based decisions following those data, and promote number of vendors coming into the locations rather than having only one selection of vendors or suppliers providing. Mobile connectivity, we have undertook a survey ourselves to have our own accurate information of which operator has EE, Vodafone, O2, or 3 has access for our residents and businesses. So we are trying to keep our own data managed by ourselves and have the most accurate information ourselves. And last question that you mentioned is what is next? And I think what is next is adoption of digital, because we provide infrastructure, we provide innovation. If we have the skills in place, if people don't use it, we don't embrace the benefits of digital. So even though central government is running the contract, I think for us as Connecting Cambridgeshire, our role is supporting the take-up. So then the investment comes back to the area, to the region from those commercial operators. So digital adoption is our next target.
Menik.
Thank you, and really positive again. It's really gratifying to know that the combined authority is helping in Connecting Cambridgeshire in delivering on the Internet of Things. And I really, just for my own interest, keen to understand item 7.3 and 7.4. 7.3 speaks to the issue of flooding and the introduction of flooding sensors. I'm just keen to, great to hear that's been a successful trial. I'm just kind of keen to understand, was that because people were forewarned sooner rather than later about the impending potential of flooding risk, or is it just that the equipment was working? And I say that because it was something actually in terms of coming into the role, I was very keen to identify as something to campaign on and to make sure that our communities are safe. ironic that we have struggles with a lack of water in some areas, but at the same time we're at risk of flooding in others. And then 7.4, well, you're speaking to the converted here, 24 low-cost air quality sensors installed. Great to see the work that we're doing in Broad Street in terms of the Combined Authority along with Fenland District Council is being monitored. I'm just keen to understand both with the flood sensors and the air quality sensors, where's the information going? We're doing it. Who's it being fed to? Where can I, as a mayor, find out information, or is it sort of open to the public? And should we be celebrating some good news there?
Are there any more questions? I'm going to make this the last round. So can I just check if there's any other questions? There's one thing I will add in, which is a question to Tim, which is, Tim, I believe that you are connected up with the roads teams in Peterborough and at the County Council. So if I could ask you on behalf of the committee to ensure that you're feeding back the concerns that we've had about roads and pavements being dug up, I think that would be really helpful triangulation. Jenna, back to you.
Thank you. Flood monitoring sensors are to make us have the data in advance of any event happening. So any IoT solutions, Internet of Things solutions, just to provide the data. So rather than sensors like fire detection, they are to give us the data for it and to make alert us that these are raising. And we are sharing those information with flood management teams so that they can have access to and be warned about those things. It is a pilot. We would like to expand more because of to protect ourselves from flood events. Air quality sensors and all our sensors projects, IoT solution projects, we are working on a data platform to find the best data platform that we can collect all information in one place and then make the necessary interpretation so that it won't be interpreted differently by everyone or by communities. So where we should share that information, how do we need to interpret it, and then depending on if we are sharing internally with our offices or by communities. So then once that data platform is available, we will be able to share with you as well. At the moment, all data being collected by the providers, sensor providers, separate locations. We are working on a data platform.
Thank you. And I do really want to thank you for the work that you're spearheading here. It is really important work. I'm sure that everyone in the room has read all the appendices to the LTCP and therefore will have noticed that the single biggest, I believe, impact on congestion and reduction, therefore, in use of carbon actually is nothing to do with demand management measures. It is getting everybody online. Connectivity is the key to this, even higher than anything else. So I think it's so helpful that you're working on this. So thank you. There is no vote needed on this. So we have managed to release you before your next meeting. And we are now moving on to the next item on the agenda. I would like to ask everyone at this point to be as brief as possible. Item 10 is a really important item. I don't wish to constrain discussion. I think, Steve, when we get to your highlights report, it may be that we're quite brief and we send something round on paper of things you haven't managed to cover. But I believe I'm inviting Tim Greenwood to come and introduce the budget and performance report. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The report comes in two parts. The first part being the revenue monitor for the period up to 31st of July. The second being the committee's opportunity to comment on the ongoing MTFP process. If I go to the revenue monitor, I'll just pick out the salient points. Within revenue, we're expecting an underspend on concessionary fares of approximately 1.5 million. Any underspend on concessionary fares would be held within the transport levy reserve and be carried forward and form part of a calculation for the 24-25 transport levy for the constituent authorities. Moving swiftly on to the capital monitor, we have a couple of projects at the moment that we're expecting there to be a little bit of slippage in, those being the A10 upgrade and Fletton footbridge. So there's a couple of items there we expect to slip into 24-25. I'll pause briefly there to see if there are any questions on the monitor itself.
Any questions on this part of the report? On the monitor part? Okay, no questions on that part. So if you want to continue, that will be
Okay, the second part of the report, as I said, is to give the committee an opportunity to comment on the budget setting process going forward. Officers are currently working on the first stage of that process during September, which is to effectively rebase the current MTFP. So we're up to date as such, rather than working with data and figures that are perhaps 6 to 12 months out of date. That work will effectively provide a recosted MTFP. Appendix 1 of the report shows the current 4-year MTFP. Members are asked to comment on the programme if there are any areas of opportunities or threats to the programme. Those in turn will be fed into the programme, which goes to a leaders group in October, and then again the updated MTFP will come back to this committee in November. So at that point, I think I've open to the committee to make any comments they have on the budget.
Thank you. It's really helpful. I will throw it open to comments. I am aware, obviously, that a lot of members are kind of keeping an eye on their watches. So I assume we can also email you outside of the meeting with comments as well and make suggestions.
I mean, given your time constraints, yes, yeah, either myself or Tim Bellamy or Steve, yeah.
Thank you. Bearing that in mind, Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you, and I think we'll take up on that, please. On the monitoring element, we have sort of a lot riding on the A141 project in Huntingdonshire, and that's flagged with some significant variance. Not for now necessarily, but we are going to be pleased for an update to come back to on that we can pick up offline or potentially at a subsequent meeting.
Any other comments or questions at this point? Tim, I think you said you wanted to add some clarification on something as well.
So just on the going back to what Tim was saying around the confessionary fares element around the underspend is, so for next year the legislation from government is changing regarding use of confessionary fares. They are well, they look like they're going to consult that actually confessionary fares you may be able to use them ahead of 9:30 in the morning. So actually that may well impact on the budget flow and the cycle of money. So the government are going out, looking like they're going out to consult on that as a position statement over the course of the next few weeks. But ultimately that will impact on our budget for next year going forward. But myself and Tim will do further work on that and feedback.
Thank you. And Tim, I kind of feel we should apologise that you've come through so late in the meeting and we haven't had the time for a long debate on this. So I really do encourage all members to get in touch with you with any questions, suggestions they have. It is very important that the work we do on the budget reflects the views of the committees. And I would encourage everyone to take the time to make the suggestions needed that we can then bring back to a future committee and discuss in more detail. So thank you very much for preparing such a clear report for us. Now, I believe, with the exception of the forward plan, the date of the next meeting, we are now on the last large item, which is the Director Highlights Report. Steve, keep it brief. Thank you.
I'll take that steer. So I will say nothing apart from just to flag one meeting I had last week, which is in the paper with the Traffic Commissioner,
Traffic Commissioner is responsible for licensing and regulating operators, and also for the regulation of bus services. So really important for us to make the Commissioner aware of our bus network review that's taking place, and the Commissioner is very much aware of that, and decisions that will be coming most likely to the Commissioner to sign off over the autumn if we are changing routes or introducing new routes. So I'll only flag that one, and happy to take any questions with the help of colleagues who may be able to help with answers.
Try again. Did just want to kick off by saying we always have long agendas because there's lots that needs discussing. There's also an awful lot that happens that doesn't come anywhere near this committee in terms of the work that the transport team does. It is really very exceptional, and as ever, I want to pass on my thanks to all of the transport team, those that are here and those that aren't, for the work that they do day in, day out, not just the big ticket items, but the background work as well. So please do pass on this committee's thanks to them. Are there any comments or questions for Steve or any of the other team? I'm taking that as a no, and we're moving swiftly on. Thank you for that, Steve, and I appreciate the brevity, and I know that you will be happy to answer questions from the committee online or after the meeting if needed. So we now move on to the forward plan. Item 12 is the Combined Authority forward plan. Are there any questions or comments, or can we take this as noted? Okay, that's that. Item 13 is the Transport and Infrastructure Agenda Plan. Does the committee have any comments on the agenda plan? Okay, no comments on that. That simply leaves us then with the date of the next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 15th of November at 10 a.m. Thank you very much to all members of the committee as ever. I really appreciate all of your input. Thank you too to the officers. I now declare this meeting closed. If we can please end the live stream.